My name is Ahrele Loschak. I'm privileged to be here. Thank you for having me. We're going to be, God willing, covering a 4-part course on dating and marriage, primarily the first half of that statement. So first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor, and as some of you may know, some of you not, Rabbi Ye is a good longtime friend of mine, and only he could have been able to get me out of the house. Because my first marriage tip to you today is do not come and teach a class on a Sunday morning the day after you had your son's bris of your 8th child. So it's not a good idea. But so my first tip is don't try this at home. But for Ye, I'll do it. Anyways, so that said, just so I get an idea of who I'm talking to, I'm assuming some of you here are married already. Is that true or no one?
Well, the fourth time.
Nobody here is married. Okay, that makes my cell a little easier actually, because no one has any preconceived notions yet. So the next question is, how many of you don't have to raise your hand, I guess you do, but how many of you are like seriously dating? That's like something I could ask. Oh, good.
So you have to date.
Good, about a half, I say. How many? And if you didn't raise your hand, could we say that you have tried it in the past? I guess you don't want to put your hand. Okay. Okay, good. So, well, we're going to be talking about. So this what I want to talk about over the next 4 weeks. Please God, is some important ideas that Judaism, particularly the wisdom of the Rebbe, has to share on this topic of dating, because it's it's something that I think everybody could use some insight. And by the way, it's not only for those who are actively dating or those who feel that they need to know more, even if you think you have it all straight. I know for myself, writing this course, that in the process of writing it for me, and I think I've been married for almost 14 and something odd years. So even in that, even for me, it was very insightful to go through the information myself and the ideas. So I hope that some of this information and these ideas we're going to learn will be helpful to you to navigate this very, very important part of your life. So our first lesson today is not going to be actually about dating. Rather, it's going to be about marriage. And to clarify, I'm not going to give you tips on marriage. We can do that at a different time. Again, I give you the first one already. But rather, just a very important conversation to address the question is why get married? It's a sell after all. We have to be sold on this idea. If you're going to be dating, and you're going to be dating beyond just meeting people and having a good time, but dating with intentionality for marriage, which is, again, what we're going to be driving at, you have to be pretty convinced that marriage is a good idea. So other than the fact that your parents want you to do it, we have to figure out why is it a good idea. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And specifically, I hope we're going to go through, I think, about 3 layers of explanation, each progressively deeper. How does that sound? Great. Good. Okay. So I give you handouts. Well, I guess we'll do as much as we can. I'm going to refer to it. But I'm going to try to see how we can make this as hopefully as engaging as possible. So if I told you all that the purpose of dating is for marriage, would you agree with me?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm already way past first base. Okay, so I guess that's the reason why I'm sitting here with a bunch of people your age and not in a freshman college, right? So the example I have in front of you is that imagine, again, something I think it's intuitive. We all know that. But I think sometimes along the way, we get lost in that idea, or we lose sight of that idea. So imagine you're in a car. I think, do I have this in front of you? Yeah. Look at that first right out. Where are we going? So imagine you're driving and your friend gives you a package to deliver to some other place. And they write down the address, or they text it to you, right? And now you're going to deliver this package. And your GPS, for whatever reason, does not work. So what would you do? What would you do?
Try back to your friend. Find out the address.
Try back to find. Okay. What would you not do? Continue to drive, right? That's probably the dumbest thing you could do. The dumbest thing you could do is if you're trying to go somewhere and you lost the address, to continue driving around, because you're literally going nowhere. So what's surprising is as simple as that sounds, right? That's pretty simple, right? As simple as that sounds, for many of us, many people make this mistake in life. We do something and we do it again and again and again, and we don't even necessarily have the address of why, where we're going when we're doing it. So it applies, by the way, in multiple areas of life, but in today's topic, particularly, is that in the prospects of your romantic life, the reason why, and this is a very important idea I think to take home, is that the reason why you're dating is so that you can get married. Okay, if you want to argue about that, you can do that, God willing, next week. But that's the premise here is going to be that that's why you're doing it. So if that's why you're doing it, then you have to know the address. The address is marriage. That's the destination. That's where you're going. So everything you're doing along the way should be in the purpose and in the intent to get. Does that mean you pop a ring on the first person who jumps into your car on the first day, or the first person you meet on that date wherever you're going? Obviously not. If you do, you have a great story to tell. But that's not the first thing. That's not obviously the first thing, but that is the intentionality. That's where you're going. So everything should be with that intention in mind to get you from there, to get from A to B. So that's the address. So if you've lost the address and you're just aimlessly driving around, so then you're aimlessly driving around and you're wasting your time and get yourself very frustrated. So that's really point number one. Point number one is that if you're already in this room, I would hope that you have that mindset. The reason why you're doing this, reason why you're dating. Now, of course, you can have friends, you go out to town, do whatever you want, have fun, great, whatever. But if you're dating someone seriously, the intention, the destination you're going to is marriage. And that's why today's lesson, what I want to do with you is to convince you a little bit more, or not convince myself, convince each other, why is marriage a good idea? Why is marriage a good idea? So let's look at it.
Are we going to talk about how we know how it would look if you were dating for marriage versus just dating for fun?
Yes, we're going to, but not today. Okay. Not today. I'm going to keep you in suspense. So if you look in your sheets, you have exercise number 2. We're going to go through this, okay? So you all see that? Is it in different color?
No, you have different colors.
Okay, so the one with all the apples. So it's not like a very fancy typographical presentation because this is still notes. This will be printed. Well, you're getting a sneak preview because I wrote it. So this thing, so you can already feel special. So my son's telling me off the shop. So it's always good to keep you in check, right? Okay, so let's look at the thing with all the apples. Why marry? It's a question people ask. It's worth considering. And just to add a layer, as you'll see in the question right underneath all those apples, this is an important question to answer in today's era. And I mean today, not just the 2023 past, I don't know, 50, 60 years, however many, that many of the conventional reasons of why marriage historically was a thing don't necessarily apply, right? Thank God, for many of the reasons why it was women had no agency, it was literally the only way that they could have any sort of life. And thank God we're way past that. And for many societies, it was illegal for man and woman to be together in any sort of romantic and intimate way. And so that we did away with in the 60s. So there's a lot of the conventional, institutional, historical reasons of marriage do no longer apply. So look at the list. If you had to pick 3 on the list in front of you, the 3 things that you would put as the top reasons of why you think marriage is a good idea, which ones would you choose?
It's interesting that the question you phrased as what do you think are the primary reasons that people get married? I think that the answer would be different if it's why people get married or why somebody should get married.
Okay. So when you answer, you could either one.
No, it's not. No, like
okay. Take a minute, look at it, think about it.
Only 3?
Yeah,
All the above.
you got to choose. That's why Amazon only gives you 5 stars because you can't, you got to do the 3 or 2. You can't go 2.5.
All right, anyone wants to tell my son's markers. So, here you want me to the back. Roll.
Yeah, well,
That's number 1.
and we'll wrap this up.
Joy Pilot.
She's an accountant right now.
CPA only.
That's our marker.
I'm sure most people choose very similar ones. No?
It's very safe.
I don't know actually, because some of them themselves sound very similar.
Yeah, that's what true. Yeah.
Anyone else want a marker?
I mean, if you don't put sexual intimacy,
No commitment.
it's a serious issue.
You could buy that.
Yeah, that's
Is there anything I can
Okay. If she needs a little bit more time, you'll have that. Don't worry. But does anybody want to offer their 3 choices? Anybody want to offer their 3 choices? No judgment. You just offer.
You done?
I mean, I won't judge. I can't just talk about anything else. Sure.
Shared purpose, children, and friendship.
Shared purpose, children, and friendship.
What does shared purpose mean?
Like you have a shared,
Common goals.
like a common goal.
Okay, great. Shared purpose, friendship, and social.
Yeah, children outside of marriage. I'm just saying.
Not everyone's outside one.
Sorry?
Is there something we should
No. Absolutely not. Not that I know of.
Anybody else want to offer their 3 choices? Come on, guys. You don't have to be so shy. I mean, guys, as opposed to. It's usually the ladies are more forthcoming.
I'd say children, financial stability, and emotional security.
Interesting.
Children, financial stability, and emotional security. Okay. That is interesting. Come on, male folk, come out of your shell and share. Anybody?
You can just call it.
It's called something.
Yeah.
Companionship,
Oh, there you go. Thank you.
children, and shared purpose.
Companionship, children, and shared purpose. Okay, we got 2 for shared purpose, unanimous on the children. Okay, let's do 1 more. Anybody?
Yeah.
There we go.
My notes.
I'm talking about you would get married, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it says people, but people are people. Let's do you. Right?
Oh my gosh.
Moving cannabis.
Gary, you want to share?
Oh.
I thought you wanted to share.
I kind of cheated though. That's okay.
There's not a happy
Can't choose you.
I think that 3 categories could be considered 1.
Okay. So you kind of made us into a science.
Yeah.
No.
So I tied in love, sexual intimacy, and emotional security as 1 category. And then I did children and shared purpose.
Okay. Very good. You have one for you?
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear it.
Children.
Shared purpose.
Children, shared purpose, and love. Okay, great. Okay, so it was different, but it's a lot of overlap.
So who's that idea? Not a good point.
Why are tax benefits not brought up? Because some of those things you can't obtain without a marriage. Right?
Okay.
Other things you can kind of get by, but tax benefits and you can
So far that still remains the case in the United States. Yeah. Okay, so what's your name?
I'm sorry?
What's your name?
Ilya.
So as Ilya pointed out, if the whole reason why you should get married as opposed to just living together romantically with someone who you love is for tax benefits, then I think you have a problem. Right?
No, Ilya was arguing on the side.
No, he's saying because he's in the United States, yes, he's right. The tax benefits out of marriage you can only get with actually getting married. But that's a pretty corny reason to get married. I mean, back in the day, that probably happened.
I'm sure it happens to
It sure happens today too. People get married for green cards.
By the way, you got your instant citizenship.
Immigration, yeah.
Financial stability. That can be put together with tax benefits, that
Sure.
improves your thing, so people select it, right?
Listen, there's no wrong or right answer.
Right.
But so what we're gonna do today is we're gonna try to figure out, because most of the things that are on this list, you don't necessarily have to actually get married. Maybe tax benefits, yeah, okay, fine. But you could cohabit, as it's called. That's the word they use. Cohabitate. Yeah, cohabitate. Cohabitate. So live together with someone else who you love, respect, and that's it. The marriage. What's the idea of marriage? Marriage is like an institution. It's a thing there, and we have to really justify. We have to explain. We have to understand why. Why is it necessary? Why is it important? It's fair. Is that a good question?
Just can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Just in terms of Torah perspective, right? There's aren't you something they don't have a chiyuv to get married? Is that correct?
There's a few to get
We
married.
do.
Per se, no. No. Yeah.
So I think
Right. You have to respect relationships. So I don't know how that would. I don't know. To be honest, I don't
so
know.
based on that, I just think it's quite an interesting. I mean, it's a
Jewish
Jewish concept.
Jewish thing, yeah. Could be, yeah, because the way the Rambam describes it, now that you mention it, and the way the Rambam describes it is that before the Torah was given, the Rambam gives the actual description. These are the words he writes. I didn't quote it here, but that's what the Rambam writes. Before the Torah was given, a man would meet a woman in the market. So, yeah, that's the words he used. A man would meet a woman, they like each other, he'd take her home, and he'd live with her, and boom, husband and wife. There's no ceremony. That's it.
It's like Hinge.
I guess they took a playbook from the Rambam, right? Okay, so number one, so before we get to the explanation, before we get to explanations of why it's important, I want to point out to you that the Torah, that in Judaism, that's, wasn't it? Josh pointed out, Judaism is a very big fan of marriage. Huge. It's not just a thing. It's not just a side thing. It's not just a detail. It's not just something that's advised. It's something that's very, very important. In fact, in the Torah, it's the very first mitzvah. It's the very first mitzvah in the Torah is to get married and have a family. As you can read it inside your text. So do we want to read text together? Let's read some text together. Everyone are going to test your oratory skills. And here's the thing. When I ask you to read, from experience, I'm going to tell you this. When you read it the first time, just read it. Then I'll give you 10 seconds to read it again in your mind. And then you can tell me what it said. Because what I found is that every time people read things in public, the first time when they're reading it, they're just concentrating on being a good speaker. You have no idea what you just said. So read it, and then digest it, and then spit it back out. So the first one's easy. It's a verse in the Torah, straight out. It's only one line. So should I like go on the table? Volunteers? I'm going to go around the table. Would you like to read?
Sure.
Go for it.
God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth and conquer it. So you want my interpretation of it?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's tying the idea of marriage and children to our partnership in creating.
Exactly. Who's God talking to? Here.
Adam
and Chava, exactly. So, and how many, did you note how many verses in the Torah this is?
28.
28 verses in. 28 verses in, we're already being told to get married and have kids. So, you think marriage is just an auxiliary thing? Just like something else that we do? It's not. It's a very important part of Judaism and of life. According to Judaism, it's a very important part of life.
It's interesting that the pasuk says God blessed them, meaning if he's blessing them, what's he blessing with? It's marriage. It's
That's right. Yeah, very good. Very first thing.
It doesn't say get married, just as have children, by the way.
That's true. But according to that, it's a good point.
And it doesn't have a lot of
Since you're based on your previous class.
It doesn't have a lot of children.
That is true. Yes, good catch. It doesn't say get married. It's interesting. The actual mitzvah in the Torah to get married only comes very much later in the context, surprisingly, in the context of divorce. So when the Torah talks about the process of how a man and woman should get divorced from one another, it says when a man and woman get married and then they don't like each other, this is what they should do. That's what we know the mitzvah to get married. The process there.
Where is that?
So that's already in Parshas Kiseitz at the very end, in the end of divorce. So, but yes, it doesn't say to get married, but it does say to have kids. And as we'll learn, in the Torah conception, there's no other way to have kids. I mean, physically, yes, but institutionally, spiritually, morally, ethically, in any other way, there isn't. That's the way. That's the only way to do it.
Maybe it's because there's no one else to get married to.
Adam had very few options. It's true. Very limited options. In fact, they only had one. Okay. This is something. So, as I mentioned when we started, we're going to be reading a lot of the Rebbe's letters on this topic in general, both today and God willing in the coming weeks. And because the marriage and dating is something the Rebbe talked about it also a lot, but in the Rebbe's letters, there's a lot of material. And it's because the whole process, by way of dating, is a relatively new thing, right? People didn't date back in the day. When I say back in the day, like probably as recently as, 80 years ago, 70 years ago. No, dating wasn't really a thing in any society. So, and certainly not in the Jewish one. So it's a relatively new concept, and we have little precedent to work with. So, but the Rebbe's letters, obviously, from more recent times, there's plenty to work with, and the Rebbe gave a lot of instruction in these ideas. So we're going to be reading a number of those letters. So text number 2 is a letter of the Rebbe that tells us how important it is, and something to keep in mind from the very beginning. Does anybody want to read text 2? We're going in order. Like 3?
Sure.
Go for it.
In English?
Yeah. Unless Hebrew is your first language.
According to our holy Torah, it is obvious that 1, you must do everything in your power to find an appropriate match and marry in the Jewish tradition. 2, you are guaranteed that if you try hard, you will succeed. There is utmost urgency in the matter, for this is the first mitzvah in the Torah.
Okay.
So you are given, so it's like, like lo b'shamayim. It's not like out of your reach, and you have to do your yishtadlut. But if you show that you're stepping up to the responsibility, Hashem will, you'll have siyata d'shmaya. Hashem will meet you there.
Exactly.
Be successful.
Exactly. Very good. Thank you. So again, what we're coming across here is that getting married, marriage is an important thing. It's not just something that society wants you to do, or that your parents want you to do, or your friends are heckling you to do. It's something it's an important Jewish ideal. Just like it's important to say Shema, just like it's important to believe in God, it's important to put on film, like Shabbos, candles. All these things are mitzvahs. So getting married is also a mitzvah. So for no other reason to convince you, you should know right away that it's an important Jewish ideal to get married. Okay. And now let's obviously get into one. I'm going to skip 3. And let's go into the explanations. So, like I told you in the beginning, we're going to try to explore 3 of them. So, for explanation number 1, to get there, I want to talk about I think a relatively popular idea. I'm pretty sure you're probably familiar with it. It's something called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Are you familiar with this? Good. If you're not, or you need a refresher, here it is, very, very quickly. There was a famous psychologist, his name was Abraham Maslow. Yes, he's obviously Jewish. And I believe he's a long time ago. 50s? I Googled that, I don't know, a long time ago. And he came up with this idea of the human beings' hierarchy of needs. And he actually visualized it in a pyramid. I'm sure you've seen it somewhere in your therapist's office. And it addresses the basic human needs in an order. And the reason why he chose it as a pyramid is because the pyramid visually depicts it very well, both in the terms of which ones build on top of the other, which ones are more important, and which ones also occupy more of our time and space and our headspace. So on the very bottom is just your physical needs, right? Like food, air, water, shelter, clothing, all the basic stuff. And then there's education, and I'm going to fib this one because I don't know them offhand. But at the very top of that pyramid, the way he envisioned it, again, you can pull it up and it come up right away. He has something called self-actualization. And that is after you had everything taken care of, after you have your basic needs taken care of, and you're not hungry, you have caffeine in your body, and you have clothing on your body, you have room to live, you have shelter, and you have financial security relatively, and you have decent relationships in your life. Now what? This is when people start to think about the meaning of life. This is when people start to worry about where is this all going? What is my purpose and what's my mission on this earth? Who am I as a person, and how can I be the best person that I can be? Right? When you're very busy running away from a lion in the desert or the jungle, you don't really have time to figure out whether or not to work through your childhood trauma with parents, right? You don't have time for that. That's why historically people never really did. But now we do. So this is the highest of the human need. He called it self-actualization. We want to realize our best and truest self. Now, here's the thing. One of the best ways to get there, guess what? Is through what? Torah, good. Marriage. Because let me tell you, and first of all, I can tell you from experience. I can also tell you from the texts, either one, whichever one is more convincing, that marriage is not easy. It's not easy. No one ever fooled you that it is. At the same time, it challenges you. It definitely challenges you as a person, and it brings out parts of you that you never knew even existed. And it absolutely changes you and develops you as a person if you so choose to lean into it. If you resist, then that's a different story. But if you do lean into the and then it's probably, it's not just the challenge, it's just the reality of living a committed life with someone else as opposed to only yourself, is what makes you not only realize the best in that person, but that person together, it brings out the best in yourself. So that's in terms of Maslow's hierarchy. We have these ideas, and again in the Rebbe's letters. So let's read that idea in text number 4.
Living as married and raising a family creates a union. Husband and wife are not just partners in life. Rather, they complement each other such that each party becomes a complete person. But this in turn helps them find deeper meaning and purpose in life, also heightening their spiritual and godly sensibilities. So I think he's saying that that obviously that marriage helps us kind of, I guess, reach our highest purpose in life and in who we can be as individuals.
You got it. Well said. Okay, so that's point number 1. Question. Yeah.
How does that make sense though?
It does.
Once you have less time, focus on yourself.
Well, first of all, okay. So therefore,
how are you going to be your best self if you only have half the time that you once have?
Okay. Well, again, I don't know. There's no right or wrong answer, but off the top of my head, I have 2 thoughts. Number 1, a lot of what you want to know about yourself, you're not going to find that on your own, right? Because by definition, you can't jump out of your own skin. So a lot. I would venture to say the majority of the development and the growth that you're going to God willing experience in life continuously is going to be by through the aid, not the aid, but by way of other people and other experiences. So opening yourself up to that person is going to actually bring up a lot more out of yourself that you didn't even know about. I said I had 2 thoughts, right? No, I really only have 1. So that's kind of where I would go with that thing. Because, how does that sound? Does that make sense to you?
You can't get that from a friendship.
You could. I mean, a portion of it. But again, the depth of how much you're going to have to pull into yourself is going to be contingent upon the depth of the relationship. As we're going to see, or as sometimes you probably intuitively know, the depth of a committed relationship of marriage is deeper than anything friendship you can have. Which is why it sets it apart from a friendship. Again, so relative to the depth of that relationship is how much you're going to have to pull and reach into yourself to, come to arrive to it when necessary. Does that make sense? You can say it. Listen, we're all figuring it out. So
I see they say what you don't like about another person is actually things that you don't like about yourself. So it also kind of serves as a mirror.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true. The Baal Shem Tov said it, by the way. I mean, in addition to the tweet that you saw yesterday. So it's true. Yes, absolutely. So, okay, so that's point number 1. And again, by the way, it's not only the challenge. I mean, the challenge is a huge part of it, but it's also just the reality of living with someone else and relating to each other in a very deep and real way. That automatically already generates growth and brings you to discovering more deeper parts of yourself. And on top of that, that's when things go well. And on top of that, when you hit bumps in the road, that actually, again, if you rise to the challenge, that makes you reach even deeper and you grow probably even more from those experiences. And eventually, over time, you can become a completely different person and reach the very top of that pyramid. Okay. Now I want to go on to the second idea. Second idea, like I told you, they're going to be progressively deeper. They're going to be progressively deeper and they're going to make less sense. But that's the beauty of it, because it makes so much sense. then it's limited to what we understand. If you can reach a little bit beyond that, which is going to be the point of everything here, it actually becomes more meaningful. And here, this next layer, again, I wouldn't say these are all, by the way, independent explanations. They kind of complement each other. They're layers. We're peeling away at the onion kind of thing. Unboxing. What?
The present.
Right, unboxing, exactly. One inside the other. The Russian doll, but they don't like the Russians right now, so we won't talk about that. So the next one is there's a beautiful text. We'll read it together. You're next on deck, so prepare yourself. Yeah, this is a deep one. Okay. So this next idea. So we're going to read it inside from the words of the Alter Rebbe, who's so what we read tonight was from the Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe. Anyone here familiar with the Alter Rebbe? Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, Shnei Zalman, whose yard site was actually last week. So he wrote a lot of books with Tanya, which Rabbi teaches so well. And he wrote other books. And we're going to read now a passage, a reading from one of his other books called the Torah. But just before we get there, and I think this kind of, this really reaches to the heart of a very big part of what marriage is. Marriage is one of the many words that's used in the context of marriage is the word commitment. What sets a marriage apart from, and this is very especially relevant today, when we have the notion of a committed relationship outside of marriage. I'm sure you know people, or maybe you've experienced it yourself. You know people who have a romantic relationship with each other, and they're committed to each other, and they may even live together, and they may even live together for a long time, but they're still not married for whatever reason. So you ask them, you know such people? Right. And you ask them why? Why are you not married? So explanations vary. I mean, come on, give me one. What's something that you've heard before? I mean, I don't think anybody cares.
Why would you want to change it?
Right. It's working. Why would we want to change it? Right. And if you think about it, by the way, it kind of makes sense. Why would you need to absolutely close the exit door, right? You always, whenever you go into a secure place, what's the first thing you do? You always look for the exit hatch somewhere, right? Just in case. Who knows, right? You never know. Maybe a nuclear bomb will fall tomorrow. You have to be able to get out of somewhere, right? You all have passports? So I thought about that. But everyone's always looking for an exit hatch. You always want that because it only makes sense. It's the most rational thing to do. So why would you? So even in a case where it's going swimmingly, so okay, so we're living together. We're trying it out. We're trying it out for 2, 3, 5, 10, 15, however many years. It's going well. Why do we have to tie this knot? Right? Marriage is old-fashioned. Why do we have to do that? We love each other anyways. I'm sure you've heard that before. And maybe you thought about it yourself. So here, this is a very profound idea that the Alter Rebbe advances. And I think once you read it, it's fairly intuitive. I'm not going to spoil it. Read it yourself.
Okay, what text number?
It's a long one.
I'm ready.
Text number
5. Yeah. You might have to summarize after. Okay.
I try to make it readable.
It happens that two lovers make a pact between each other that their love should never expire. In a world where the matter upon which their love is hinged would never expire, they obviously wouldn't need such a pact. We don't live in such a world. And they are concerned that it will expire, taking the love down with it, or perhaps some sort of outside factor will torpedo it. By making a pact, their love will endure forever, never falter. Nothing, neither from outside nor from within, will separate them. Why? Because they made this strong pact between themselves, elevating their love to an ironclad connection that supersedes all logic. No logic dictates that their love should expire or that some sort of conflict will get in the way. Nevertheless, their strong pact drives their love to endure forever. How? Love makes one blind to their own deficiencies. By making this pact, they elevate their union and become as one body. As such, just as it's impossible to stop loving yourself, so it is with your lover. You don't have to summarize.
Want me to summarize?
Yeah.
You can?
There's a summary.
Some time.
I just need a little time. I'm just trying to get every word right.
Just read the summary.
So read it. No, read it. No, the summary is the whole section.
People are focused on themselves oftentimes, and if you commit to somebody else, even when there's struggles or makes it hard or challenges, the pact binds you together to push through, like without the path of marriage. and the obstacle and the hurdle being bored would potentially ruin that relationship.
Yes. Also, what was her name?
Gabby.
Gabby. Let's give Gabby a hot minute to finish
Thank
reading.
you. Sorry.
And then we'll see what. There's anything to say. What reading it out loud? Read it to yourself.
Remember, I don't know if it was Rabbi Yaya who said this, but and remind me if it was, if you can break apart without the involvement of a rabbi or a lawyer, it's too easy to just break apart when things get difficult. So the purpose of marriage is to ensure that if there is a difficult patch, it's not like so easy.
Okay.
Was it you?
I didn't say those words, but it's an idea. I never seen a lawyer rabbi. That's why I was listening. I do argue that point.
Depends on the lawyer.
I feel like it's just talking about like how strong like the marital love is. Like it really just, I mean, I know people get divorced, my parents are divorced, but like it really can be fixed. And yeah.
Okay.
That's what I got. So.
Good. I think I can illustrate with a story I recently heard.
Yeah.
Short story. There's the Chabad Shliach to Milan, Italy. His name was Rabbi Ahrele. He passed away. But his first name was Gershon Mendel. There's two names. He, just to give you context for the backdrop of the story, so he was Russian born, lived most of his early life in Israel, went through, lived in the communist, in Soviet Russia, but he was from a Hasidic family, so much of his activity was underground. A lot of that, I don't think I have to describe to you like kind of grit and passion and determination that comes along with that sort of, upbringing. As a young man, he moved to America, he got out, and he got married eventually to another Chabad girl, but she was from an American family. So again, both Chabad, all the way, but he's Russian, Israeli, she's American. So you can imagine there's cultural differences, even if they're both Chabad and they have all the same, values on paper, but still culturally they're a little bit different. And then shortly thereafter, the Rebbe sent them on shlichus to Milan, Italy. So I heard her tell the story. And shortly after her husband passed away, till this day, she's lived in Milan for, 50, 60 years, but she's American apple pie as they call it. Mm-hmm. So, because her parents, her immigrant parents, I think it was her great-grandparents immigrated here. So they're pretty American. Anyways, so she says when we first got married, she had these romantic notions, love and this and that, and her Russian and Israeli husband wasn't really on board. So then, and it was hard. They're in Italy together, all alone, and in the early, probably the 50s. It was really, it was kind of difficult one. So one day, her husband comes home, and she asks him, Gershon Mendel, do you love me? He says, of course. And he didn't even speak English. He said, of course. And she's like, why? And so he said in Yiddish, he says, I'll do this mine. It's because you're mine. That's why I love you. Which is a little bit counterintuitive, right? Most people say, what do you mean? That's first of all, chauvinist, it's patriarchal. What do you mean? I love you. I love you because you're mine. No, I love you. And because we love each other, then we become each other's. Not the other way around. But the truth is, and we'll learn about this more. I'm going to have a whole lesson going on love. So it's a good topic. But just to touch on in this context, there's something that happens when two people make an agreement, a strong bond. And the way I would word it is that the pact, the agreement itself generates something that transcends them both. Because here's the reality. When two people commit to each other, when two people love each other, it's never going to be 1,000% that equilibrium in your entire life. It's impossible. You're never going to always like each other. Fact. If you do, then I don't know. You can enter into the Guinness Book of World Records. The reality is it's not going to happen. What keeps two people together? When that time comes, there's a time of conflict. And when there's time of just boredom or ennui, they call it, right? And you're like, I'm just not feeling it. What do? Just go for the next shiny object? Some people do that. But here's the thing. When you remember that we made an agreement, however many years ago, it was 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 5, 10, 15, 30, 40, however many years, that agreement itself over time becomes the baseline of everything upon which you build. And it's only because you agree, because you mutually agree with each other. That's the whole point of making the agreement. As you read, that when two lovers want to make sure it's cemented forever, they make that agreement, because the agreement says that no matter what, it's no longer dependent upon the feelings of love that we have right now, because that's fleeting. It's because we've deeply committed to each other and we manufacture something that will elevate beyond the both of us. And that's something that can only happen if you get married. If you're two people living with each other, just because you have a mutual agreement, because so far it's going well, and even if it's going well for a long time, like I said, we have an exit hatch. There's no agreement. There's no reason that you go to bed and say, I'm secure. This is always going to work. Now, again, does divorce happen? Of course it does. Sometimes it's broken and you have to break it, and that's the thing to do. There's always a mitzvah in the Torah to divorce. I'm talking at the majority, at least in the onset, the ideal of how it should be portrayed. Just to illustrate this idea, not to impose the spousal relationship onto a parental one, because they're very, very different. That's you should never look at your spouse as a child or the other way around as a parent. But there are elements of connection and commitment that they share. Right? Everyone here, Baruch Hashem, is sitting in therapy on unpacking your childhood trauma, right? Good. So now, why do we all have childhood trauma? One of the things, why? All right, let me ask it a different way. Why is trauma so associated with childhood?
Those are the most formative years.
Those are the most formative years, right? And why is trauma always inflicted upon us by our parents?
Because our parents are just humans living a spiritual experience.
No, I'm not asking why they make mistakes. Why is it our parents that make them? Why not you teach your... You're dependent on them. Right. You're dependent on your parents. Your parents frame your entire world. Your parents give you everything in your life as you develop. Like you said, it's your formative years. Your parents are your world. Everybody's parents is their world. So that's for the good and the bad. If the parents, I mean, again, every parent is a flawed human being. So parents do good, parents do well, parents mess up. Parents try to use that reality to the good and provide their children with everything they need, more than just food, clothing, and shelter, but also emotional, psychological support, and everything that they need going forward. But that responsibility carries it with the flip side, that they could also very easily mess it up. They could flip the wrong switch repeatedly, and then things go very, very awry, very bad. So the point, what I'm trying to make is that the reason why there's a trauma occurs in those years, or vice versa, why the positive building occurs in those years, because they're security. Your parents are your security; they're everything to you. And if you don't have it, if a child doesn't have that security, then they're literally they're out to sea. They have nothing. That security is what you need. And where does security come from? From commitment. So now, the parent and child, 99% of the time, thank God, naturally the way God programmed the world, that it's just naturally there. A child just knows that he or she has their parents' commitment no matter what. They have it. Just by definition, by virtue of the fact that they've been born to these two humans. Again, sometimes it doesn't happen, and that's when there's severe trauma. So again, not that a spouse and parent is not the same thing, but in that element, that security, that commitment is what you're looking for. It should be there. You go to sleep at night, or even when you're traveling abroad and you're away, or you're apart from each other, you have that knowledge. And it's not even a conscious one, but it's somewhere very deep inside your heart. Deep inside, it's kind of seared into your soul that you have a committed relationship. You always have someone there for you, your spouse, and you're there for them. And that's only something that you can get when you commit to each other in a committed relationship, what we call marriage. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Hope so. Okay, finally, we're going to just dig in one layer deeper. This is probably an idea I think you've probably heard before, but it's worth reviewing. And it's called soulmates. You heard of that one? I think you have. Yeah. So now, I was curious. Soulmates, by the way, in Jewish tradition, it exists from Kabbalah. We get it from Kabbalah. I was interested because every culture has it. They all have this idea of soulmates, right? And I was curious why. So I just Googled, I just went on Wikipedia. How does Wikipedia define a soulmate? Read it. This one should be easy.
Oh,
I'm looking at you. Huh?
without reading it, is what I think.
You could say what you think. I was offering you to read.
Oh yeah.
Number 6. Then you can say what you think afterwards.
Okay. All right. So text 6 says, in current usage, soulmate usually refers to a romantic or platonic partner with the implication of an exclusive lifelong bond. It commonly holds the connotation of being the strongest bond with another person that one can achieve. It is commonly accepted that one will feel complete once they have found their soulmate, as it is partially in the perceived definition that two souls are meant to meet. So,
yeah.
So from this, it's basically saying that you won't feel complete until you've found your soulmate. So it's not saying that you won't be complete until you found your soulmate, but you won't feel complete until you found them. I think it's also interesting that it says that soulmate can be either a romantic or platonic partner.
Yeah.
That was very surprising. And the platonic part I would not have.
Well, it's Wikipedia. It's trying to be impartial as possible, right? So now this is curious. You realize what you read for, right? It wasn't a Jewish book you read, right? So it's Wikipedia. That's really the first paragraph. I just clicked and put it in there. Now, because I'm thinking to myself, how did I get this? I'll tell you why. Because I'm I read a lot of this type of stuff. So on my Google feed, I get all these random articles all the time. So one caught my eye. It says, "Don't marry your soulmate," like from Psychology Today or whatever, one of these random websites. So I finally piqued my interest. I looked at it. And no, it wasn't. It was maybe some media essay. I don't know, whatever. Anyways, it was a pretty convincing argument by a relatively older woman who's lived with her husband for a long time, married. And it was clickbait. But the point was that she was arguing that soulmate is a fantasy, and you have to work on it, and marriage is work, and that's kind of, in a nutshell. And which I was thinking, so I went to Wikipedia to look up soulmate. Where does culture get this idea from? Like common Western culture. First of all, souls, I don't even know what people think souls mean when they say the word soul. And why should you have a soulmate? Whoever came up with that idea, I think people want to inherently believe and feel that this is the truth. So now, I'm not going to answer for Wikipedia because, again, I'm not an author there. I don't really care. But thankfully, in our Jewish tradition, we have something called Kabbalah. We have Jewish mysticism. And the idea of a soulmate is very much supported in Jewish literature, in Jewish thought, particularly, again, in the Kabbalah. So for the sake of time, I'm going to skip 7s, 8, and B, A and B, and text 8, especially because 8 could bring in a couple of red herrings. Yeah, right? But we're going to go to text 9. Ilya, what do you feel about reading text 9?
Well, I was hoping to read the 7A because some little lines.
Well, it's 4.5, and there's a couple of ellipses in there, so it's really probably only 4. You don't have whatever you could.
When God sends forth soul into the world, each includes a male and a female joined together. When they descend to the world, they are separated from each other. When their time to be married arrives, God who knows these souls join them. Who knows these souls join them as they were before they descended to the world. When they are joined together, they become one body and one soul.
All right. So in a sentence, what did you just read? In your own sentence.
Well, first of all, I didn't understand myself. I was reading this one. I'm like, okay, I got to analyze it.
You can take it home.
I can think about it. But I think this is what you were talking about. Judaism supports soul-mate concept.
Right. I don't know if it supports it. It may have invented it. I don't know. It's always a pretty old book.
If that's the case, how come just a bunch of rabbis don't get together and go correct the soulmate part on Wikipedia to reflect the true meaning? Because you guys can have a big body of people and nobody will.
Working on it.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Tomorrow.
I knew there was.
We're going to update it very soon. There's a whole shadow Wikipedia you don't know about. I'm just kidding.
I know we're reading the text and we're talking about it and we're reading the definition. Isn't what we say that Hashem creates our soulmate weeks before we're born and it's in the stars? Or is that a...
Yeah, I I don't know what to start, but.
Did we say that already and it went over my head?
No, that's what the Zohar I think we read just said, basically.
Yeah. Okay, it was brief. Okay, so not like completely am I?
What do we say starts?
No.
Oh,
Shoot the
that's
stars means in heaven.
Yeah, constellations.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That's what we just read. Yes, and it's here in the Zohar, and it's another multiple places.
Sarah did the ellipsis.
Yes. Yeah, it was in the ellipsis. Very good. Yes. So the Zohar, which is the original Kabbalistic work, authored by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who lived, I don't know, 2,000 years ago, advances this idea. And again, the word Kabbalah means tradition, right? So it's only authored then, but the tradition existed from the beginning of time. It says that Adam, the first man, wrote a Kabbalistic work called Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Creation. We have that book too. So we have Kabbalah is a very ancient tradition, and we have this idea in Kabbalah that every person has a soul, and a soul, according to Judaism and the Alter Rebbe advances, I don't know, dedicates half the book of Tanya to these ideas. The soul is a piece of God inside of you, and part of that is that it's incomplete. Yes, you have two souls. The text that we skipped was that in creation, God created Adam and Eve together as a conjoined body. So literally the first husband and wife created literally together in their body. And that's reflective of the spiritual reality that they were connected in their soul. So like you said, Adam and Eve was easy. They only had each other. So it was kind of a no-brainer who they could choose. But the reality exists for all of us. We all have the second half of our soul that we're missing. And we find it in our spouse. And that's what creates the feeling of being, as we'll read in text 10, of being never alone.
Okay, one more question. I don't know if my mom made this up or even Stein told me this. I'm not sure.
Which one's more authentic?
When soulmate thing happens, like we just said, and it's like two people, whatever. When Hashem who gives us this little thing right here, Hashem comes right before you're born and goes like this and gives us this little dot, like right here, and that's when your soul is put in you, so your soulmate is determined.
I don't. I can verify the majority of that.
Really?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. The Gemara talks about how the fetus learns Torah in the womb, and then by an angel, and then the angel taps it. It doesn't say it here actually. It says on the face, upon it. I don't know exactly where it could be.
When the Rashi notes, we get specific.
And then you forget everything. So that's why you spend your whole life discovering. So maybe part of that is you forget who your soulmate is. And you spend your whole life looking for them, or not your whole life, but part of your life looking for them. Okay, so this idea brings us to. Should we read text 10? Yeah, let's read text 10, and then we'll wrap this up. Ilya was last, so whoever's on his right is next in the hot seat.
I didn't prepare either.
You're not supposed to prepare.
So how about this? Why don't you just read it now, and then you'll tell us what you read. Instead of reading out loud, because I don't see it out. Read it. Yeah, I'll take the pressure off. I mean, not really. You all read it.
Who's this rabbi?
I don't have a profile on it, to be honest. Relatively contemporary.
Who?
This rabbi.
Yaakov Dvarkas? Weitzman Hagen Hussein? Probably contemporary. Absolutely. No, you should say it over in your own words.
It's easier for me to read.
I know. That's why I'm challenging you.
Oh my gosh, you're changing the rules.
Reading comprehension. Come on, you did this in high school.
Right.
You can read it out loud if that's more comfortable with that.
Yeah, like as long as the person that is not married
even if he finds himself in the company of thousands of others, they are still alone. For gathering of thousands of lone individuals does not solve the loneliness of any one of them. Only when one attaches to another on an essential level, when one accomplishes this, even if they are alone in the desert, they're not alone. For within their being is embodied their helpmate, their spouse. So it's kind of what you said before. I forgot how you phrased it, but that was a good summary. That you're always, once you have the commitment, you always have that person behind you.
Exactly. And here it's reflective of a spiritual reality because it's the second half of your own. So obviously, you're with someone. You're never alone. Have you ever had that feeling when you're in a room with a lot of other people and you're talking and you're chatting and you're holding the cocktail like a boss and you're still alone? Mm-hmm. Right. And on the flip side, when you have a committed partner, a spouse, you could be really actually alone, but you're not alone because you have a second half of yourself completing you. And then, okay, for sure, when you go somewhere else and have someone on your arm, better. But that's not the point. The point is, at a soul level, you're never alone anymore. And that's something that, just to finish off, we talked about previously about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? So he phrased it, the highest one is self-actualization, was the word he used. Now, it's been updated, by the way. One of the, Viktor Frankl, who's a very prominent voice in psychology as well, also Jewish. I quoted it for you here on the page. We're not going to read it together. You can read it on your own. He made a very keen observation. And he said that after thinking about it and observing life, and he had a lot of life to observe, he came to the realization that self-actualization is actually not really what humans really crave. What we actually crave the most is self-transcendence. Because when you actualize yourself, how much are you already? You're a great person, I'm sure. But is that really all you want to actualize, yourself? Ironically, we actually self-actualize, if I can use the word actual so many times, we self-actualize the most when we transcend ourselves. Chew on that one for a second. We actualize our own selves the most when we transcend and reach beyond our own selves. And there's only a few ways to do that. One very good way to do that is to get married, because you're reaching into the very depths of your soul, finding the other half of it. So you're reaching a depth that you would never have on your own. You could be a great person, and I'm sure you are. And you could probably have self-actualized in many manifest ways. And that's great. But there's a certain level of, and the example he gives is the eye, right? What's the best eye? The eye that works the best is the eye that cannot see itself, right? The eye that sees itself is the eye with glaucoma. The eye that sees the most and the eye that sees the best is the eye that sees itself the least. So we see ourselves, we see the furthest, we reach the furthest that we can, and we see ourselves the least. Living with a spouse for the rest of your life is a great way to do that. And not just in the cynical way, in the meaningful way. All right, that wraps up for today.
Sure.
Thank you, Rabbi.
God willing, the next time we're going to learn, once I've hopefully convinced you that you should get married, or you convinced yourselves, learn about how to date, more effectively to get there.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.